Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Makeup and Movie Monday. Hope you're doing very well. So today it's Monday and yeah, today is, of course, as well as most of the time, it is my Makeup and Movie Monday. So every Monday I will I normally like to kind of talk about a film while I put on makeup. It's kind of based off Bailey Sarian's kind of makeup and murder mystery Mondays, where obviously I've done a different take on it. A lot of people do versions like this, but I wanted to do one based around makeup. I'm not the first, I'm not gonna be the last, but yeah, every Monday I'm here to do these videos. Sometimes I haven't done them due to other things I wanted to do, but today I'm not going to be concentrating on one film. I'm going to be talking about my own personal love of film, because I have grown up watching a lot of movies. Like, I know my movies, and I just wanted to kind of talk about like my journey of loving film and working in a cinema and kind of my love-hate relationship for the cinema. But I might make that into another video, maybe next week's video, but we'll see how far I get, because obviously, as always, I've got a full face of makeup. So let's just get into it. So as always, the makeup is always going to be like, I'm not going to talk about the makeup. Everything I use I always write in the description. So yeah, basically. So I don't remember the first film I saw, because I'm like 33 now and I don't remember what happened yesterday, because my memory is basically a goldfish. Like, I remember something for 5 seconds and then it's gone. But my earliest memory of going to the cinema is seeing The Mask, and that's the movie with Jim Carrey, of course, and Cameron Diaz. I remember going with my mum and my aunt, and I believe we went to, I grew up in East London, so we lived near Stratford. And there was a cinema called the Picture House, which is still, I'd say still around, but during like COVID, a lot of cinemas have had to close down. So I think it has closed down, but it was around for like over 20 years, or maybe even longer than that. But I think there might have been another cinema that we went to locally anyway. And I remember going to see it and it being one of the weirdest experiences of my whole life, because I don't remember how old I was, but I remember it being the first film I went to see there. And from there, I think I grew my love for cinema like even more. And growing up in a family where we're very like TV orientated, obviously I know a lot of families during the 90s when you'd have the TV on and then you'd sit and have your dinner. That was basically us. Like, we literally, like, we even had a table in the kitchen, but we still ate in front of the TV, because that's just the way that I've always grown up. I know a lot of families do things separately, and obviously I think that's probably a good way to do it, to kind of get you away from the TV for 5 minutes. But I grew up like my dad just always being locked on the TV, and that's how I've grown up as well. And I just remember every kind of Saturday, Sunday, you would tune in on like BBC One or ITV. Like, there wasn't even Channel 5 at the time. There was literally only 1 to 4. We didn't even get Sky until I was like in my mid-teens, because it was quite expensive, and I think my sister had got it, so we had managed to watch some Sky, but by then I was already a bit more of a kind of teenager. And yeah, just watching like the usual repeats on BBC, obviously like Indiana Jones and just a lot of Harrison Ford movies, you know, like the typical like Back to the Future and other like 80s movies, because this is more like 90s stuff, because I grew up in the, like, I was born in the late 80s, so I was born like kind of as obviously a new era was starting when it came to the 90s. But I remember like just my dad having a ton of DVDs, tape, VHS tapes. Kids, if you don't know what a VHS is, you're too young. No, but obviously I'm sure a lot of people know what a VHS is. Obviously there's that whole Betamax thing, I think that's what it's called. No, I'm not that old, but I think, yeah, I was obviously definitely around during VHS because we had tons of it, and I still have some in my collection, just ones that mean a lot to me. But I remember, because we used to have a Woolworths, repping up Woolworths, just down the road from us, and we would always go and just like have a look at what VHSs are there, and just kind of see what we could buy. And I just remember we didn't have a Blockbuster, but we had like a DVD, like a rental place called Apollo, which was down the road from us. Like, if anyone is watching, like, who lived near me, you'd probably remember Apollo, because it was just down the road from where I lived, and it was basically like a lower end of Blockbuster where you'd go in and there'd just be a whole just like shop of, you know, VHS and some DVDs. I think this is when like DVDs were getting much bigger at the time, but we only had like, yeah, a VHS player for quite a long time. And yeah, I just remember like growing up and just constantly watching films. Like I was literally, God, I can't even remember, like I just remember having certain VHS, and there's pictures of me on like my 3rd birthday where I'm standing in front of a fridge and I've got my Who Framed Roger Rabbit tape. It's one of my favourite pictures of myself, because I believe, or my family would say, like, said to me that that was like my obsession, and I kind of like remember it, I guess. I know like Beauty and the Beast was like one of my obsessions as well. And just growing up with film has always been so important to me, because it's something that I am very passionate about. I've always, when I was growing up, I was like, oh, I want to like teach, you know, that film and everything like that. Like my brother, he taught film and stuff, so that's kind of like extended in our family and everything. And even when I was like thinking of when I went to college and stuff, I was like, oh, should I do film and stuff like that? But it became more of like, I'm passionate about film, not passionate about learning about film, because I was at that kind of cocky point in my life where I was like, I know so much about film, I don't need to like learn about it and blah blah blah. But obviously when you learn about film, you learn about the technical stuff, but I've always been more interested in the films itself. And just kind of, yeah, growing up being completely obsessed. And this was before like we had internet at home, so I was constantly like watching TV, and kind of learning things as I was like going along, like remembering who this actor was and remembering this director and what other films they were in. And obviously when I got to like secondary school, that's when I became more kind of obsessed with learning about film on the internet. So I would like, you know, IMDb would be like probably the best website to go on, because you would be like, oh, okay, there's this one actor I think is awesome, let's look at a list of all their films. And of course you would find their entire list on like IMDb, and you still do today, because IMDb still exists. And obviously now you have like, what is it, like Rotten Tomatoes? I don't really read that, to be honest. And yeah, I think IMDb for me was like the main one. And then as I kind of progressed into like, I just became more passionate. I don't know, it just becomes a bit more difficult to describe, because everything was about film. Like I've always had that mentality that music and film for me is quite balanced. I go through like times when I'm obsessed with just listening to music, and then there's just times I'm obsessed with thinking and talking about movies. And if someone ever said to me, oh, Ameena, can you help me, like, what's this film called? I'd be like, I know what it is, and who's this actor, and what's this. And I kind of was really proud about it, because I knew that I had some kind of just something that I was very passionate about. And especially like movies, it would be like, okay, this movie's coming out, I'm going to watch it either in the cinema. And I remember growing up going to cinema quite a lot. Like I said, there was a cinema just like 15-20 minutes down the road, and there was more and more cinemas were kind of becoming a thing around like the East London area. And then as I kind of got to a point where I was looking for a job, I was like, this is when I was in uni, so I was like, okay, I need to look for a job. So then when I applied to work in the cinema, I felt like I was able to kind of project my love of film a bit more. But when you work in the cinema, it's not about really what you know, it's about like just kind of customer service and just getting on with it. Like around you there are people who are extremely passionate about the same thing as you, and it works if you have colleagues that love the same thing as you. And I definitely had that. I think a lot of people who used to kind of like, I mean, I don't really know about now, like if a lot of people work in the cinema because they're passionate about film, working in the cinema probably is not going to get you to a higher potential that you want to. Like if you want to work in film, don't really work in the cinema. It's as the aspect is more kind of just looking for like a hierarchy job. Not saying that working in the cinema is like low or anything, but you're not gonna get to the cinema industry. And honestly, working in the cinema, it was a really fun job, but it was more fun because I got free cinema tickets. So there was a day when I went to see the first Iron Man like 2 or 3 times because I was so obsessed with it, and I could go and see films for free. And I think when I was working at the cinema, like I worked in Leicester Square, it was more easier for me to go and see certain movies, because if I didn't have the money, because I was part-time job, I was at university at the same time, and if I wanted to go see a film, I would go and get a complimentary ticket for a cinema just across the road, and I could go and see a movie for free. So I wouldn't have to spend my big bucks, even though later on I ended up getting a Cineworld card, which I really am glad I did, because it was definitely worth getting. Like when I used to go to cinema constantly, because there were days when I didn't want to be at home, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to cinema and probably watch maybe 2 or 3 movies in a row, because with a Cineworld card you'd get unlimited movies. So you would literally, I'd get there at like 12 o'clock and then watch one film, and then at 3 o'clock watch another, and then go home. And that would be like, oh, okay, I really want to watch this film, let's book a ticket. And you know, for 20 quid a month, like couldn't really go wrong. But then it kind of faded a lot actually when I used to go to cinema, because it started getting more crowded. London started become a bit more overwhelming for me. Like it's not about me moaning about, you know, tourism, but obviously when you're working somewhere like in central London, and then tourists come to central London, it gets a little bit much. And obviously like very grateful at the time to have a job, because working in central London is, you know, quite, when I was younger I was like, oh my god, it must be so cool to work in like West End. That's what we would call it, West End, because that's where everything happens, where everything is so cool. But I remember growing up, and occasionally, I don't think I actually went to any of the cinemas in Leicester Square until I started working there. But even then, they're great cinemas. Like the cinema I used to work at, which used to be called Empire, which is now Cineworld. If they've closed it down, I can't even remember, to be honest. It was like the screen one that you went into was like one of the biggest screens in London. You had the IMAX, which is in Waterloo. That was an amazing screen. That's obviously like one of the biggest screens in like Europe. I think it's the biggest screen in Europe. And going there is just amazing. I remember the first film I saw in there, I believe I went to see Watchmen, and we sat like the 4th row from the front, and that's a bad idea, because when you're sitting like that, it just wasn't a great experience. But then I remember after that I went to see, it was like a few years later, I went to see Dark Knight Rises in there, and I sat right at the back, and that was like perfect. But then when you went to see like a film in Screen 1, it was just the most amazing experience ever. Like that screen was absolutely beautiful, and then they got rid of it. And then Cineworld kind of took over, and then that's when I think, when I stopped working at the cinema, things for like my passion kind of went down a bit, because I feel, well, like I mentioned, going into a cinema and it being completely packed, like me and like my friend, me and my friends, we would go quite a lot during uni, because again I had my Cineworld card, or if I was, you know, student rates were a bit cheaper, we would go like all the time. But it got to a point where it was just like, like it's so packed today, do you really want to go? And then sometimes you'd kind of be like, oh, okay, I really want to go and see it, but it's sold out. Or if it's just, you know, the reviews have not been very good and stuff. But I essentially, when I stopped working that, I still went to the cinema, because it took me a while for me to actually cancel my like Cineworld subscription. But it helped a lot, because me and my friends and my partner, we went to like a lot of midnight showings, so it would help. Like, yeah, that's another thing I want to talk about as well, like midnight showings. Pretty much been to went to all like the new Star Wars midnight opening, and then like the Avengers ones as well, and it's an amazing experience. Like when you're all there for the same reason, and no one's talking, no one's like being an arsehole, being a dickhead, it all just is a great experience. But then obviously there's times when the movie is like Thursday or something, and then you got people on their phone, you got people with like looking at their phone constantly. Like the whole point of a cinema is to take yourself away from the real world, because you're going to experience another world. Even if it's like set on Earth, it's a different experience, because you're not living your life essentially. Like obviously when the film ends, you're going home and you're back to living your life. But those 2 hours, 3 hours that you're in the cinema, it's a time for you to forget. And there's always times when I've had to literally like shout at people and say, can you turn off your phone? What the hell are you doing? Like, why are you in the cinema if you're constantly just on the phone? And even when working there as well, you have people who would come out and say, look, there's a group of kids that are like shouting and stuff, can you go and like talk to them? And you're like, do you really have to be told to not talk in a cinema? Like, it's such a weird, because I guess growing up, when I went to the cinema, I'd never had any of that, because we were just always kind of like, okay, it's time to go to cinema, it's time to be quiet and it's time to enjoy yourself. Because especially when you spend all your money to like go and see a film that you've waited to see for so long. Like one of the worst experiences I ever had was going to see The Dark Knight, and obviously this is like one of the biggest movies ever made. Like this is like Heath Ledger's Joker and all that stuff, and this is literally as it came out, and there were a bunch of school kids and they were just like shouting and screaming the whole time, and no matter how many times people had said to them, can you shut up, can you do this, they just wouldn't stop. And after a while you kind of just like silly, but accepting that it's just kids being kids. And I'm like, no, this is a cinema, this is like my money that I've, you know, earned to spend and go and see this film. But then a lot of people just kind of like take it in stride and everything. And there's always been times when I've had bad experiences in the cinema, and it shouldn't let you not go to cinema again. But like over the years I've kind of lost love for going into the cinema, because it's so overpriced. Like the food is so expensive, everything is kind of just like doesn't feel the same as it did a long time ago. Like I know like a lot of my old cinema work friends feel the same. Like when you're going to the cinema, you want to have a good time, and if there's even one person that like ruins the experience for you, your whole day is just kind of ruined. Because even like before you work there, it would be like, okay, this is time to relax and time to do whatever. And even now, like having worked in the cinema for like 3.5 years, and now, you know, going to other cinemas and seeing what it's like, and obviously spending, like some families can't afford to go to the cinema because the tickets are so expensive. Like for a family ticket you're spending 60 quid, and this is just to see a film. Like to sit in the cinema for and most kids films are not even that long. Most kids films are like an hour and a bit, and then most of the time it's kind of like, okay, so you've got the kids like a ticket, you got yourself a ticket, if they want popcorn or if they want anything else, okay, that's like 30 quid more. So you're spending a fortune to go to the cinema. And I know, sorry, this video is like me changing the topic on my love for cinema, but when it comes to enjoying film and enjoying cinema, everything is so connected. Like you can't, it's difficult to separate cinema and like your love for it if you really have something that you're kind of frustrated about, and that you kind of lost love in. And it's really sad because when I was growing up, I loved going to cinema, I loved watching something in the big screen, but now if I can avoid it, I would 100%. I would 100% do that. I mean, honestly, the last film I went to see, I think even before lockdown, might have been Star Wars, because like there was nothing I wanted to see, plus expensive tickets, and it was Star Wars. So obviously we went to the midnight showing, and that was a fucking shit show of a movie. I'm not going to talk about it in here as much, but yeah, I wasn't very happy with that movie. But anyway, but then the experience was fun because it was a midnight showing, and I went with my partner and one of our friends who I've seen like every midnight kind of film with, and yeah, it was weird because I think that's probably going to be the last midnight showing that we're ever going to go to, because it's just such a hassle and everything. But we made the effort to go, which I was so happy about, because you know, when it comes to going to the cinema, I always feel like having an immersive experience. But if we had gone at like an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock showing, the experience would have been so much different. I wouldn't have been able to enjoy it. And I'm not just saying like people who go to midnight screenings are like the hardcore fans and would never talk or anything. Obviously there were people like cheering and doing this and that, because I was doing that as well. But when you're actually like having conversations with people and not looking at the screen, which is the whole purpose of you being there. Sometimes it's like going to a gig, which this happens a lot as well. You go to a gig, the band's playing, and you're there just having a chat with your friend. So it's not the same as it used to be. I'm just going to put on the lips and then we'll round off the conversation. Okay, I've just put my lips on and the colour is a bit odd, like this doesn't match. I don't know what's happened with this, but anyway, this is my finished look. This video has turned into a rant and I'm really sorry. I literally wanted to just talk about like me just becoming a big movie buff, and I guess I did talk a bit about it, but I think I went off on a bit of a tangent, which I tend to do these days, so I apologize if I talked a bit too much. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because I film and upload every time I get a chance to. Yeah, if you're a new subscriber, hello, thank you so much for joining my channel. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I hope you guys are doing well. I'll be back with another Makeup and Movie Monday next Monday. I don't know what I'll be talking about. I'm sure I'll find something else to talk about. But yeah, yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye guys.